Today, we're going to talk about storytelling, visual storytelling, but also we're going to get a grounding in story structure. So some of the stuff some of you may have had exposure to previously, others of you may not have had exposure to it. So at any time, if I'm going through the presentation and you don't understand anything, or I'm using terms that you're not familiar with, I do want this to be a conversation, so please interrupt me and let me know that you need me to further explain something. We're going to be talking about some story theory as well. So it may seem at first a little far afield from the practical aspect of going out every day and turning a package, but if you understand the structure of story, then you will begin to look for those elements as you gather your material. And so then naturally, they will be able to fall in place seamlessly as you structure your scripts and your articles, and begin to actually assemble the material that you've gathered, the facts, the video, the sound, and structure a lucid story that has a narrative arc, beginning, a middle, and an end. And so the agenda for today is the hello. We'll go through story ideas. Where do they come from? A lot of young people who first join our team are in one of the big hurdles they have to get over is that anxiety about showing up at the morning meeting and having a good idea to pitch, one or more. And so we'll talk about where do story ideas come from in the world, story structure, visual story structure and tips, and then we'll just do a review of the professional branding that's underway with you guys and a couple of housekeeping items, and of course Q&A. Stop me and ask me during the presentation, but of course we'll have a little time at the end, hopefully, to also answer questions pertinent to today, or if you guys just have any other general questions, please, I'm here for you. We're doing this for you, so speak up and let me get you the info you need, okay? So from where do stories come? They're all around you, really. You can find them in your home, you can find them in your neighborhood, in your city, state, country, on planet Earth, in school, in church, in government, in groups you may belong to in person and online, and from other people. People are the core of story. It starts with a person or people, right? And people gather together in these types of units and interact. And so invariably, there's going to be stories that spring forth all around you. You really just have to keep your eyes open and ask yourself, this person has something to celebrate, this person has an issue, this person has a conflict, and might that person's individual story represent a more wide or universal need in the community or theme in the community, and they would be an example of something more than one person is going through. And from where do interesting stories come? Well, interesting stories come from conflict, right? And this doesn't mean there has to be a fight. There just needs to be some sort of issue where someone confronts a challenge and overcomes that challenge. Those are the most interesting stories, right? Now, where does conflict exist, right? Three major levels or areas of conflict exist in the world with humans, right? A person can be in conflict with themselves. So that's an inner conflict. So I have doubts about myself. I have tendencies or habits which don't allow me to achieve my full potential. And so I get connected with a mentor, I get connected with a teacher. And so I overcome those shortcomings and I grow and I achieve my goals. So, think of all the stories that could come out of that. A troubled student is not excelling in school, and they meet a teacher that changes their life and perspective, and they turn their life around and they achieve great things. An athlete, who has tremendous potential, has, things that are getting in their way. They're not doing the kinds of things they need to do to achieve their full potential. A coach reaches them, they change, they adapt, they use a new tool, they use a new idea, they excel, they win the game. People can also be in conflict with other people. So that's outer conflict. That takes place in the form of a person in conflict with another person. A story about, neighbor A, built a fence on that encroaches on the property of neighbor B, and they have a big showdown, and it's caught on security cam video. We've seen a number of those sad stories where people just lose their cool, and unfortunately, recently, we've seen one where people die, because of somebody shoveling snow onto somebody else's driveway. It seems ridiculous, but human heart and human emotion can drive stories, and so there is conflict between a person and a person. That's outer conflict. And then there's the universal conflict, a person against the universe. And existentially, it's a person against death. We all have a limited time on this earth. And so we, this is often manifested in, storylines where people want to have their life stand for something meaningful. Am I going to make a difference on this earth? Am I going to change things to better my life and the lives of others and make the world a better place? And so those are three areas of conflict: inner conflict, outer conflict, and universal conflict, and how they might manifest themselves with a person or people. How does that normally manifest itself? Well, with a person to a person, it might be a fight. The example I gave you of two neighbors squaring off over somebody's shoveling snow onto their driveway, and then the neighbor A doesn't like that. A group versus a group, a contest. I mean, think of how many billions of loyal fans and airtime and is spent watching, a soccer team play another soccer team. That's conflict, right? But it's a one we all agree on is okay. My team plays your team. I'll root for mine. You root for yours, and we are emotionally invested in this, right? Sometimes conflict manifests itself in terms of the conflict over resources, an issue versus an issue. We want to protect our ancestral land, says this Native American group, and this company over here says we want to drill for oil on that land. And so the government is in the middle, brokering the conflict over resource issues, right? Sometimes it's a competition for attention, all right? So it's one idea, conservatism, right, against another idea, liberalism. Think just in the last couple of years of political campaigning and elections and all the historic things that the United States has gone through. And in portion, at its heart, is a conflict between two overarching philosophies or idea, but they have, manifestations in the real world that have costs. I mean, people died in the insurrection at the Capitol, and those were two competing sets of ideas, right? So there is a competition for attention. Those groups say, I want you to believe in our stuff, and here's our info. The other group says the same thing, right? And then there's conflict between perhaps an event and people. And so the response is where that conflict takes place. That would be something like a natural disaster, an earthquake, a hurricane, and that might be also an example of the universal conflict, man against nature, right? People against nature, where no one did anything wrong. The earth, something happened on earth, and now we have these phenomenal, motivating, and inspirational stories of people seeing others in need and hurt by this natural disaster, and they rush to help these other people. And a lot of times we will rush to cover those things because those are incredibly human and powerful stories that have meaning, and the stakes are high because these are life and death stakes. Are we doing okay so far in terms of how I'm outlining this, everybody? Okay. So, this doesn't say anything about you going out and shooting a piece of video, right? But remember, all this is the overarching umbrella. All this is in the background, and all this is motivating the actual two people, perhaps, that you're going to interview and where they meet. And you see these examples in the middle of the screen here of where they might meet and where conflict might exist. So if you have these frameworks in your mind, you can start to ask questions about, why these people might be motivated to do what they do. So who are the players in stories? Again, they can be individuals, people, they can be groups, they can be an organization like a church or a club, it could be institutions, nonprofits or something like that. It could be businesses, governments, a coalition of groups. They could be the mob. Sometimes people they don't question. I'm sure there were people during that insurrection that just thought they were going there for a big demonstration, and they got caught up in the moment and they did some stuff they shouldn't have done, Um, all those players in stories can surface, and you will eventually, in the course of your career, cover most, if not all, of those types of players that occupy the stories that you report. Now, what motivates them? There are some various things that motivate people and individuals and organizations as they engage in their activity and where they might meet an opposing force in conflict. Some of that is fear, right? I'm afraid of something. I'm afraid I might, I'm afraid of that tornado. But the weather guy comes on TV and he says the tornado's coming. Take cover. I go to my basement. I can empower myself. I can protect my family. I'm okay. Greed. People like money, right? So you hear story after story of someone trying to, steal or embezzle or do something in a way which enriches them and may hurt others. Ignorance. Again, sometimes people speak out of an absence of information. This word ignorance doesn't mean stupid. It means the absence of information. So I might think, oh, well, I'm making a good decision because I know that X, Y, and Z is taking place. When in fact, you might have unreliable information. You might be acting, in a way that you think is positive, but you have missing information that if you knew it, you would act in a different way. Ambivalence. Sometimes people just don't care. Right? they don't care. Something bad might be happening over there, but it doesn't affect me. I don't care. Right? Sometimes people act out of emotion. I used the snow in the driveway scenario. I mean, who would have thought when those two neighbors got up that morning that one of them would be pulling out a gun and shooting another one because he shoveled snow in his driveway? But anger welled. The guy lost control and did something evil. Right? And then, there's a flip side of that, altruism. Sometimes people do act for the better good and the betterment of humanity, and they don't need anything in return. There are a lot of good people in the world, and it's always fun to be able to find one of those individuals or groups and tell their story, because it inspires the rest of us to think, you know what, maybe I can do that too. How might a player in a story take action? A player in a story, maybe not always consciously, but certainly in description, will be weighing the cost and benefit. If I take action, at what cost is it to you? If I'm the protagonist, if I take action, what cost will it incur on the antagonist, this person opposing me in my quest for this? And what benefit might it have to me? Some people act out of malice. They seek revenge. Someone did me wrong. I'm going to do them wrong. They act out of malice. Some people act recklessly, right? I'm going to go out. I'm going to party with my friends tonight. I'm going to drink and I'm going to drive. And frankly, I'm not going to think about it because I don't want to think about consequences. I'm acting recklessly. Maybe I'll get home okay. Maybe I'll kill somebody with my car when I'm DUI on the way home, right? Sometimes people act out of they don't do anything. They're displaying apathy. I'm not taking action, but even not taking action or not making a decision has a cost and it has a benefit, right? Sometimes again, people act out of generosity. I've been successful. I've accumulated these resources, and so now maybe I'm questioning what I can do to use these resources to better the world. Think of Bill Gates donating billions of dollars, that he's made that he's never going to be able to spend it all. So him and his wife form a foundation, and they start teaching people to read and improving healthcare and stuff like that, right? Sometimes people act out of empathy. You may not have a lot of material resources, but you meet someone, an individual, and you see, oh, I can feel what they're feeling. That's what empathy is. You feel what they feel. And you realize they're in pain. I can do something to make them better. And though I don't have a lot, I can take a little bit of what I have and I can give it to this other person, and it will lessen their pain or increase their joy. Sometimes people act selflessly. I know there's no benefit to me. I know there's a huge cost to you, and so I'm willing to act on your behalf, even though I get nothing out of it. And it doesn't have to be empathetic. I don't have to feel what you feel, but intellectually, I can see that group of people need some help. You know what? I'm going to help them. And then ultimately, if someone acts sacrificially, then those are some of the most powerful stories that you can ever cover. I mean, think of those first responders that ran into the towers on 9/11, and they knew probably they weren't going to be coming out alive, but if they could make it inside and help some other people, then their actions would be meaningful. So they knew full well that the job I do, and in this moment, the decision I make in this scenario could mean the ending of my life, but I choose to do it anyway. I act sacrificially. And you think about the immense power in a story like that, if you get to cover a story like that. You ought to always be asking why a player is taking the action they're taking in a story. Someone you're interviewing might tell you, I'm doing X, Y, and Z because A, B, and C. Even if they are the head of a charity, you should give them the benefit of the doubt. But you should always still in your mind be asking, why are they taking the action they're taking? Could there be another level to this story? Could there be something else going on? I served on the board of a nonprofit organization at one point, and the person running that nonprofit organization was a friendly, jovial person that came to the meetings and, gave us the reports of all the stuff they were doing in the community. And then, and so it felt good to be involved in something positive, right? Well, then lo and behold, 3 months later, this person's getting arrested for embezzling the money from the nonprofit. They had us snowed, they were doing some good stuff, right? But then they were also skimming off the top so they could, buy cars and take vacations. And so always, if you have a little tickle in the back of your head and you're thinking, something may not be adding up, you may not want to show your cards, but trust your gut, jot that observation or feeling down, and then maybe, ask questions tangentially around that subject to see, does my gut or does my spider sense bear anything out here? What makes a story? You all probably seen this in your textbooks, and you've seen it since high school journalism, the 5 W's, right? What's going on? Where is it happening? How close is it to me specifically? When? Timeliness is a big issue with electronic journalism. Is it happening now? Is it happening in the future, or has it already happened? And a component of this is maybe that tornado example. Can I prepare? Because I know ahead of time that something's going to happen. Who is it? That has a bearing on the level of interest some people have in a story. I mean, is it me? Is it one of my family members? Is it my neighbor? Is it somebody 4,000 miles away from where I live? And they probably have less interest if that's the situation. How does this situation work, and why? What is motivating this story, this situation? What makes a strong story? Okay. Relevance. How am I connected to this story? Is it a story about taxes going up, and taxes are going to be, magnitude and interest, right? So are taxes going up? Property taxes might be going up next year, but they're only going to go up $10. I might not feel good about, if I own a house, that property taxes are going up, but if they're only going up $10, maybe I don't want to go on camera with you and talk about it, the fact that property taxes are going up. But what if property taxes are going up 8,000% next year, and my property tax bill is going to go up, $7,500? I'm probably pretty motivated, and I'm angry that the county commission passed this millage increase, and I might be ready to go on camera with you to tell my side of the story. So think about it. What kind of magnitude does this conflict or this story have, and what level of interest might a story participant have in the story, and then as a result of that, in participating with the reportage that you do on the story, right? Proximity is a big deal, right? If there's a surge in a unique new type of sickness, and it's happening in Australia, I'm probably less interested in it than if you were to report to me, it happened at the elementary school that my kid goes to. So how close is this story to me? And the closer it is, the more I'm interested. So, there's a saying in news that all news is local, right? So the closer a story is, the more interested your viewers will be. Timeliness, right? Has it already happened? So I can't do anything about it. I'm probably less interested in it, right? Is it happening right now and I'm watching it unfold on a live camera? You see news stations and cable stations and digital content outfits. I mean, if it's live, they got a live super on it. They got a bunch of rotating graphics and they keep saying live, 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 right? Because that's the drama. The question is, it's just like a sporting event sometimes. It's what's going to happen. This might be a car chase in LA, but it's a dramatic event and people want to know what's going to happen. So how timely is it? Or is it in the future? And so might it affect me and can I prepare using the information you give to me? Connection. Who does it affect? Again, does it affect me? Does it affect my family? Does it affect my extended family? Does it affect the people, the families of the Little League team that I coach? Those kinds of things. Understanding. Sometimes people are not interested in stories, perhaps say coming out of financial reporting or coming out of Washington that involve the different types of bills that are going on, because they don't have an interest in finance. They don't have an interest in the inner workings of politics, and yet the decisions made about that financial story might have dramatic impact on that person because they might not get as big a tax refund next year, right? But so it's your duty as a reporter to explain that to people so they will understand, oh, okay, that's not just a bunch of rich white guys in Washington, D.C., playing in their power games. That actually might have an effect on me, right? And so understanding it, part of your duty as a reporter is to help them understand. Here's a key one: emotion. How does it make me feel? That is the goal of the gold, GOLD, of a lot of reportage and storytelling we do. If you can find the emotional connection between the primary actor in a story, and I don't mean an actor as a dramatic person, but a participant or subject in a story, if you can see in that story the emotion they're going through, then, and it could be positive, I've achieved something, it could be negative. I'm confronted with a challenge. The emotion in a story, you're always looking for the emotion in a story. And that doesn't mean you're trying to get someone to cry on camera. That's all inauthentic. That's usurious. You don't want to abuse your story subjects like that. It just means you're looking for that kernel in a story. And if displayed from a story subject, you're going to have make a decision in your storytelling choices about how do I make sure I get that in the story, because that's going to motivate people to be interested in the story. And purpose. I mean, what does it mean? How does it fit into the larger context of what I believe? If I'm a Christian, does that story fit into my belief system? If I'm a Sikh or a Muslim, does it fit into those belief systems? Is it counter to what I experience in my ethical or religious or moral conduct in life? And if not, I mean, that starts wars, right? I mean, if something is opposed to your core beliefs, then you might pick up a weapon and say, I will fight to defend what I believe, right? So the purpose, what is the purpose in this? Is it all making sense so far, guys? Are we still on track? Okay. Now, what makes a strong visual story? All those things we've been talking about, manifest themselves, in our context in video, right? I'm going to see it, I'm going to listen to it. And so that involves the meeting of all of these theoretical things and all of this story structure elements and the practical nature of capturing it on video, right? So there are some basic things about visual storytelling that we have to remember. You may have the most emotionally driven, most meaningful, most proximate, most exciting story, but if you shoot your story and it's out of focus, you will have failed the viewer because they can't see all this great stuff that you want to share with them, right? So, you have to learn your gear. And if you go out into the world, you're probably going to have to learn multiple systems. Like at our station, we shoot with Sony cameras. They're about this big. We also shoot with GoPros. They're this big. We shoot with a drone. We shoot with our phones. People shoot material for their stories with their phones. So you don't need to always put it on auto and roll, because if you don't learn the mechanics of the gear that you are using, you are setting yourself up for a situation where something in the environment is going to cause the camera to react in a way, and you're not going to capture the heart of what you want to capture, right? So you need to learn how to use every piece of gear in full manual mode. This requires more practice. This requires some technical knowledge. Not everybody is often comfortable with that. And honestly, you use it in full manual mode when it doesn't count. So you take your gear out and you shoot sequences of your dog in full manual mode, not for a story that you're going to broadcast, but so you will habituate yourself to the operation of your gear. And when it counts in the moment, when you're out there covering severe weather and a tornado drops out of the sky, half a mile away from you, then you can use your gear in a way to successfully capture that dramatic video, and you automatically and instinctively react without having to guess, wait, do I set this? Do I set that? Your camera's already set up. You're analyzing the environment. You're knowing, well, if this happens and it gets brighter, I need to do this. If it gets darker, I need to do this. And so you've already practiced that and repped that a bunch of times when it doesn't count. So in the moment, you know how to capture the great stuff that's happening in front of the lens. There's action. There's a difference between a still photo and video, because video shows movement. It shows action, right? So with action, people are used to seeing with their eyes a scene, and I'll use the scene of somebody chopping wood, right? You're doing a story about a lumberjack who lives out in the woods, and he's a survivalist, and he's in some of your videos, this guy chopping wood. Well, match cut, some of you may know what match cutting and edit is. Some of you may not know what match cut is, but in essence, it's trying to replicate reality. But in order to take the viewer's attention and place it where you want to place it, this is one of the backbones of sequences, which is if I have a wide shot, right? And I'm see the cabin, I see the woods, I see the stump, I see the axe, I see the guy, I see the wood. So here's a wide shot, boom, guy chops a piece of wood in half, right? Then you come in closer and you get a medium shot, him head to toe, chops a piece of wood in half. Then you get a close-up of just a piece of wood. Axe head comes into frame, chops a piece of wood in half. Then you get a reaction shot. You don't see the wood, you're looking up at him. He's staring down at the wood, swings the axe, boom. There's 4 shots I just described, that are a sequence. And so what you want to do is you record like 3 or 4 hits in each one of those framings, and then you only need to use one of them to do a sequence, or 1 or 2 or 3 of them rather. You'll see the wide shot, chop, then he goes to chop again. You come into the medium shot, head to toe, to get closer to the action, and you observe keenly, where are his hands, where is the axe. And so you want to cut from the wide shot to the medium shot so that it continues that motion fluidly, right? And then you cut to the close-up shot, and the axe head comes into frame, and boom. So you're paying attention to how fast the axe is swinging, where it is in the frame, and you're match cutting that action. Because if you don't match cut the action, it doesn't look fluid and it looks fake, I mean, this wasn't an actor. This was a real person that was living their life, and you were invited in to caption their life, but it looks choppy and it doesn't look real. And your job is to convey reality, right? So match cutting action is important. Reaction, people sometimes concentrate on what's going on, the chopping of the wood, but they forget to get the reaction shot, which is the guy's face when he wipes his brow and has a little smile and is like, yes, I did a good day's work. I chopped a bunch of wood, right? Sequences. I just described them really, wide, medium, close, extreme close up, extreme wide. Think of how the human brain captures a scene. What happens with humans is you come into a scene and it's wired into us. It's in our reptilian brain. It's a survival mechanism. We come into a scene and immediately we start analyzing for threats. So the first thing a human brain does through our eyes and our ears and our other senses is it scans the entire horizon in a millisecond. The entire scene, it's scanning. And first and foremost, going back to survival days before we lived in cool air-conditioned houses and buildings, when we're out, trying to hunt and gather to survive, you're looking, is there anything out here that can kill me? If the answer is no, then you're like, is there anything I can eat? Right? And then is there anything here that's going to make me more comfortable? Okay, well, there's no bear, right? Oh, there's some berries, right? Oh, there's some wood I can make a fire with. I can bake me a blueberry pie. I'm in business here. So that's what your brain does. So your brain does wide shot, and then it starts breaking that scene down into, what is that over there? Boom, your eyes and your brain focuses on something individual in the frame. And that's really all a sequence is in video. It's mimicking the natural and instinctive nature of the human brain and the human eye to take the whole scene in, analyze for threats and benefits, and then go to the most interesting stuff in the frame. So play to that when you're constructing your stories, right? You want to open with a powerful or interesting shot. Sometimes that's the wide shot. In the case of the guy chopping wood, here's a wide shot. Wow, that is a beautiful forest glade with a lake in the background, and the sun is coming up, and there's a cool looking cabin, and there's that burly dude over there chopping wood. Man, this is a really cool looking scene here. I'm interested in what's going on in this scene, right? Sometimes you don't have a really great opening shot, wide shot, but the coolest looking thing you have is actually an extreme close-up, right? Maybe you're in a lab and you're doing some story about some medical research, and one of the coolest things you have is the close-up of the hands of the researcher as they take that sample and they put it near the warming flame, and there's a chemical reaction that's a bright flash, and you're like, that's really cool. So I'm going to open my story with that because that's just the most visually interesting thing I have. And then I'm going to explain and pop out to a medium shot, then give a wide shot to orient the viewer. So you want to grab people with an opening shot to suck them in and keep them watching. You also want to close with a powerful closing shot because you want to have them react in a visceral way, touch their emotion so that they remember what you've just told them in your story. Another thing that you want to remember to do in your video is take the lens where the viewer cannot go. Now, you don't want to get them punch drunk and dizzy by spinning the lens all around and zooming everywhere and, where they can't really follow what's going on. I mean, that works in music videos, but it doesn't really work in TV news, right? You want to actually have them see and understand what's happening in the frame, right? But, typically, if you're in a lab and you're watching that researcher, you're not allowed to walk over and stick your face this close to the experiment they're doing, right? But in order to see that little flash of spark and green that they're thinking, they're telling you their whole theory of chemical reaction is based on that flash of green light. Well, the camera lens can zoom in super tight and capture that spark of green light, and you're like, I saw it. Oh, okay, now I understand what that scientist is trying to explain. So the camera can take you and the viewer where you might not normally be allowed to go or where it's not safe to go, right? I mean, we can put our drone up and we can fly, along the edge of a forest fire and get dramatic video and show, wow, that's how close it is to that school. But the firefighters are not going to allow us to walk a half-mile into the woods to get close to that fire line, because it's not safe to do it. The wind could change at any moment and we'd be trapped. So, you can take the lens places where people aren't allowed to go and show them cool things. And that always involves, you should be thinking, how am I going to intrigue the viewer? Not only convey information, but how will I intrigue the viewer and perhaps surprise them? That little green flash of light in that example I used about the medical researcher, that's a surprise. Wow, that was really cool looking. And what does it mean? And then they're hooked and they want to know why the research is doing this research and how that can help cure that disease, right? And one of the cardinal rules of video is, if you're doing a story, if an anchor is delivering a story, if you're doing it in a package, if you say it, then you want to see it. I mean, think of this example, right? Live reporter on scene, live report. You see the flickering light on the side of the reporter's face, and the reporter starts talking about the incredible fire that's happening over their shoulder over here, and it's right off camera, right? You don't see it yet. It's right off camera. And there's a 5-story building. It's on fire. There's 12 fire trucks in place. And what if the video that team shot and sent back to the station, something happens to it and it doesn't air? Think how angry the viewer is as the reporter stands there describing this dramatic scene right off camera where you can't see it. That's incredibly frustrating, right? So that's probably a moment where they open the anchor's microphone and the anchor says, "Hey, Sally, we got a problem with your video. Unlock that camera and point over and show us what you're talking about." So those kinds of moments do happen in TV. But in general, if you're writing a script and you say long lines outside the Civic Center today for Cardi B tickets, you better see people standing in a line, right? Say it, see it. Say it, see it. There's the other component of your story, which is what people hear, right? This is a stumbling block for a lot of young content creators because it is an afterthought. They go out, they concentrate on, it's like, especially with using a phone, right? You got your phone, you frame up your shot, you start interviewing your person. You're thinking, wow, you're so into the story. This person's got a dramatic story about the things they've confronted and overcome, and they've really come a long way in their lives. And I can't wait to share this story with my viewers. And then you check the video and the wind's blowing. You can't hear clearly what the person is saying because the wind is blowing against your phone mic, and all you hear is a bunch of wind, and you can't use any of it. You can't convey that story. So, when you're using a phone, one of your wisest investments is a little $15 lav mic that plugs into your phone, So if you don't have one of those, you should go to Amazon right now and buy one of those little $12 lav mics, right? Or get some sort of mic for your phone where I'm going to get good audio. Because if you can't hear a person talking, you can't use it, You cannot use it. You can't wish your way to success and hope the viewer is going to be able to, if you're sitting there with headphones on in an edit bay, trying to understand what somebody's saying, if there's any question, we don't use it in the story. I say, sorry, your story's dead, or go back and try tomorrow, or use something else, because you can't wish that the viewer is going to get what the person's saying. If you can't clearly hear it, coming out of a tinny phone, with the environment all around you, then the audio is unsuccessful, because that's where a lot of people watch your story, right there in their phone while they're riding the train, while they're sitting in the passenger seat, hopefully not when they're driving their car. But, think about all the things you're competing with. So you've got to take care. Again, remember, the first thing we talked about with video are the technical requirements. We make art through technology. We are not really artists in the purest sense of making art for art's sakes. We are crafts people. In other words, we make art through technology, and we make art that is useful. That's the difference between an artist, someone who's going to paint a painting and hang it on a wall, and really, it has, you can't use that painting to you could maybe use it to prop a door open, but if you paid $1 million for it, you wouldn't do that, right? So that painting might not have any practical use. We are craftspeople, which means we use artistic techniques to convey useful things to people. A craft person would be somebody that would make, a whisk, right? And you can use a whisk. It looks cool. It's beautifully designed, and you use a whisk to cook with, right? So we make stories. People enjoy those stories. They appreciate the artistic aspects of those stories. But in the end, they want to use those stories either just for enjoyment or to get the information to make decisions in their lives, to make their lives and the lives of their families better. So we are craftspeople. So technically, you've got to get solid audio of natural sound and of your interviews. And if you're shooting on your phone, there's two things you probably need if you don't already have them, right? Let me grab this other one here. You need the microphone I talked about. And you need one of these, which is just a little phone tripod, right? Now, you can use, and this is the one, I recommend you get this one because it has these bendy legs. And if you're out, like when you want to shoot a stand up, you can bend it around a light pole and set it up and then step away from it and record your stand up, right? So I recommend you get one of these ones with bendy legs on them like this. If not, you can get another little, you need something that you can mount the phone to and have a handle in essence. Now that serves a couple of purposes. Number one, you can use it to shoot stand-ups like I just described, or just the act of taking, you have your phone and you're shooting like this. Even if I am super, super stable, your hand is going to convey a little bit of shake to that phone. A lot of phones now have stabilization stuff built into the software for the video, but you want to employ mechanical means and not rely on the technology in any of your gear first. So you, just by taking your phone and clipping the tripod to it and then using this as a handle, you isolate your hand from your phone and it reduces shake. Also, by using a handle, you can do creative things that you might not normally be able to do by gripping the sides of a phone and doing it like this. So get a little tripod for your phone, use it as a handle. It reduces shake. It also empowers you to do some more creative things, stand-ups and other types of moves with your phone, and get a little lav mic. Those would be the two things that I'd recommend you get for your phone that you kind of really need. Or if you're not able to afford that, then just make sure when you shoot your interviews, the wind's not blowing at 10 miles an hour and distorting your video, right? The other thing about sound is, we think about getting the sound of the interviews. We don't always think about getting the sound of the environment. So if the guy's chopping the wood, you want to hear the axe head hit the piece of wood and chop it in half, and the pieces of wood fall off the stump and clank on the ground. If you are doing a story about, somebody mowing the lawn, you want to hear them, you want to see the close-up of them, their hand come into frame and grab that rope and pull it, and then the lawnmower go and start up, right? If you're shooting a beautiful nature story, and it's a wide shot, and you're like, okay, I'm shooting a nature story, why am I here? And then off, over here in the distance, you hear some sort of call of a bird or something, and then you cut to a shot of a bird, then your mind naturally says, oh, I just heard the bird, and then the camera went over there and showed me a picture of the bird. So natural sound can lead you and the viewer to other places in the story, and also it's the way people experience the world. So imagine if you go shoot a bunch of video and there's no nat sound on it, and then you put that over your voice, it doesn't seem as real to people. It's not as strong a story because people don't walk around, enjoying nature with their fingers plugged into their ears so they can't hear anything usually, right? They want to experience the sounds of nature as well as the sights of nature. And it doesn't have to be a beautiful scene in the forest. It could be walking around a city, right? So natural sound is incredibly important. And the reason I talk to you about having a natural sound burst is because if you're experiencing this scene in the sequence, and then you sneak a little bit of nat sound underneath the last part of that sequence for the next sequence, The bird example, remember, I'm looking at a wide shot and I hear the sound of a bird before I see the bird, and then I cut to the close-up of the bird. It takes you from one scene to the next. So you can use natural sound to get you from, you can forecast and plant in the viewer's mind, what was that? I think that was a bird. Oh, I just saw the bird. Boom. You fulfill their expectation, right? So those are some of the reasons why you need strong nat sound and why you need nat sound bursts in your story. You want to begin and end your story with a little bit of nat sound. So naturally, the scene I just described, boom, wide shot, you see this beautiful scene in the forest and you hear a chirp, 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 a bird. And you're like, okay, what's going on here? Boom, close up a bird. Okay, I'm in the forest. The story's probably about that bird, right? An endangered owl or whatever. And then near the end of the story, perhaps it's a story about somebody rehabilitating these owls and setting them free after they've been caught in traps. Well, the opening nat sound is the bird chirping in the forest, and you see the bird, and then maybe at the end of the story, after a bird has been injured and rehabbed, then you have the story, where the wildlife workers open the cage and the bird flies out and goes free after rehabbing, and everybody cheers and claps. That sound of them clapping before you do your out cue, that's the ending nat sound burst of the story. And you see why that might be important to convey that emotion and that activity in the story, right? So like you open with a great picture, open with great sound. Like you close with a great picture to make the story memorable, close with great nat sound. And again, intrigue and surprise, just like the video I talked about, in that example of the owl, you see the watch out of the forest, you hear something chirping and you're intrigued. What is that? Boom, you cut to the picture of the owl and you're fulfilled. And so sound and video can intrigue and surprise the viewer, and you want them to enjoy the story as much as possible too, right? Interviews, I described the kind of sound bites I would like you to get from your first subject when you interview your subject. And I talked about process sound bites and I talked about motivation sound bites, right? Process sound bites reveal what is happening. What, in the case of a story about some guy chopping wood, you'd interview him about chopping wood, storing wood, burning wood, and then you'd use all those sound bites and you'd put them underneath the video of him chopping the wood and stacking the wood and storing the wood, because you wouldn't have to write a track and voice it if you've got the star of your story who's the expert on chopping wood explaining how to chop wood, right? And then at some point during the story, you always want to get some why sound bites. What is my motivation? Usually a why sound bite is going to have a couple of elements that you want to try to have a couple of elements. You want to have a framing similar to or inclusive of some of the things we're all seeing right now, which is you want to see two eyes of your subject and two ears. And all that means is if you're interviewing somebody and I can see both their ears, but I can't see their two eyes, I'm looking at the back of their head, right? That's probably not a good way to read the emotion on their face and understand why I'm so motivated to chop wood, right? All right. If I see one eye and one ear, this is what I'm saying. And as a viewer, I'm asking, why is that guy not looking at me? And because I can't see his face, I can only see the side of his head. I can't read the emotion on his face and see, as he starts to describe the joy of chopping wood. And I'm being a little facetious here about the exact example, but you get it. If I can see, the human face transmits so much when people are not even talking. You will see the raise of an eyebrow, the tremble of a lip. You'll see instinctively, you might see the glassiness start to happen in an eye before a tear ever falls. Your brain picks up on that stuff. And with the cameras we have, we can get real tight. Whereas I can't go right up to somebody's face, like this and look for that. The camera can get right in there and grab that emotion. So a why soundbite will help you tell what your video is not showing and what the people aren't sharing with you intellectually in those process sound bites. You get inside their head, and if they're really willing to share, you get inside their heart. That's the emotion. Remember, the key to the success, one of the keys is emotion. And one of the keys to conveying emotion is to look that person in the eye and to see how they're reacting, to talk about this thing that they care so passionately about and want to share with others through your story. Does that make sense? So we've talked about where story ideas come from. We've talked about the structure of story. We've talked about how stories manifest themselves between different people and groups and organizations in the world. We've talked about how to approach gathering those stories. We've talked about specifically in the form of a video story. In this slide, we've talked about how you capture those stories, some of the techniques and tools you use to capture those stories. We've talked about things to look for so that as you go into a story, before you shot in your video, if you know these things about people, if you know these things about story structure, if you know these things about what is required for a video story to convey the true essence of what that person is trying to share, and if you're technically a ninja with your gear, then when you walk up onto a scene, you are prepared to capture the magic. That's going to make your stories phenomenal. It requires work, it requires practice, but if you do that, and you're going to get some of that practice by turning these stories that we do together in our time together, if you approach it with the elements that I've just shared with you, you're going to be empowering yourself to take your game to a whole other level. And the great thing about it is the more you do it, the better you get. So the reps you get in this course will help you take it to another level. And if you keep doing it and you are disciplined about doing the stuff that you got to do to practice off camera when you're not on a story, you're going to take your storytelling game to a whole other level. Those are the elements of story structure, story motivation. It's capturing stories, specifically capturing visual stories with video and audio. Do y'all have any questions at this point about any of the story structure stuff, the theory, the very practical things we talked about in our discussion about capturing video? By the way, if you want a brand name, this little tripod is a Joby tripod. It's Joby. It's super cheap. I think it cost me like 11 bucks, and it's a great little tripod. GorillaPod is another one of those that has these flexible articulated legs. They're a little bit more expensive because they got the big brand name, but it's probably only $3 or $4 more expensive. But those are really good. And then honestly, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of money on, I wouldn't go spend 50 bucks on a lav mic for your phone. I mean, in the context of what you're doing for this course, I'd spend the 10 or 12 bucks to get you one that's not going to, the wire's going to break in a week. But don't spend a ton of money on gear. But those two little things will give you confidence that when you get to a scene and you need to interview somebody, or you need to capture video, or you need to shoot a stand-up, you got one or two things that just make it so much easier on you. So those are the two elements I would recommend. If you're shooting with your phone, you get. And if you're shooting with a regular camera, have a tripod. You're going to want to be able to set it up, and you're going to want to be able to frame a stand-up and also have stable shots.
Gene, if we have access to other gear that is not our phone, would you recommend that we use that still?
I would say use whatever gear that you have available to you that you feel comfortable with. I mean, we will purposefully structure the exercises and the assignments in the course to make it so that you only have to use your phone if that's all you have. But if you have other gear and you're thinking about a story and you're like, I can't get close enough with a phone, I got to have a zoom lens to get in close on whatever, that owl in the tree, so I'm going to check some gear out from school, or I've got my own DSLR with a couple of cool lenses. So yeah, I'd say that I don't want to handcuff you. You use whatever you're comfortable using to do the stories.
Personally, we just have more like do have some network equivalent type of gear here, and I'm just curious if that made a difference. That's all.
Yeah, I'm really more interested in you guys picking up the concepts of what shows up on the screen, a stable, interesting wide shot, solid medium shot, solid close up, no shake, exposed correctly. You know, I'm less interested in how you got it, and I want to make it intentionally easy on you. I'm interested in what I see on the, like, a viewer doesn't care what camera you shot it with. All they care about is if they like the story. So if it's easier for you, or you're trying to get a twofer, like, I want to shoot these stories, but I know that I'm targeting, I don't know, I'm targeting television stations in Rochester, New York to get my first job. And I know that 3 of the 4 stations there all use this Sony camera. And well, it just so happens that Syracuse also uses that Sony camera. I'd probably go use that camera for a couple of these stories and practice with it, so that I know day one, if I get a job at one of those TV stations, I can hit the ground running and I already know how to work that gear. So you're getting a twofer out of it. Does that make sense? Cool. What other things might be on your mind about story structure, story theory, video, audio, how to capture it, how to successfully employ it in stories? Did everybody get at least one takeaway from today? Thumbs up. See. Okay, good. Okay, well, I did one thing right then. Okay. All right. So remember, assignments. You know, as we go through the course, you know, for social, rather, this is the first set of assignments. I wanted to specifically point out we're a couple weeks away, but if you want to go ahead and start working on it and start practicing, that's what I would recommend, right? And there's one change here as well in the rubric. Social media posts, remember, I see you guys are emailing me those Gmail addresses. If you haven't done that yet, please do. They're coming in. Nice work. Standardize your professional branding across LinkedIn, Facebook, a Facebook page, not a profile, a professional Facebook page, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Those other platforms that I mentioned, if you can grab those and grab the real estate and own your name on all those platforms, do it, so that you'll have it from now all through your professional career. So you want to publish, you know, your first sort of like social media post that I'll be looking at the week of the 22nd to the 26th. And you do want to publish Monday through Friday, because social media consumption drops off on the weekend, and you want to get your posts to have the maximum impact. So habituate yourself to publish Monday through Friday. Your first digital story is due by 1 o'clock Wednesday, the 24th. The previous emails I've sent you said it was an 800 word count. It's not. I talked to the digital lead producer here, and we decided to make it a little easier on you guys, so that you're not, you know, really struggling. You can get a 500 word story out. So your target length for your digital stories are 500 words, not 800 words. Get some still photos to accompany them. If you're doing a story, remember your first web story is about a fellow student who has been affected by COVID-19. And you want some still photos of that student to accompany your article. That article is due by 1 p.m. Eastern time, Wednesday, the 24th of February. So you got some time. My suggestion again is go ahead and get started, right? And knock it out and rewrite it several times. Show it to your classmates in the internship. There's some folks you trust at school who are good writers, maybe a professor, and get it repped and get it rewritten and get it standardized to AP style, and knock it out early. And while you're doing that, look ahead to text story number 2, which is a student or an alumnus whose job search or job has been affected by COVID, right? So present student, life at school affected by COVID is story number 1. Story number 2 is, I'm now out into the professional world. How has my job search, or if I've successfully landed a job after graduation, how has that been affected by COVID? So you see the natural progression there. I'm in school, I'm affected by COVID, I graduated, I got my first job, or I'm still looking for my first job, I'm affected by COVID. And COVID may be the reason why I don't have a job yet, right? So those are the first 2 stories. So we're looking, you got a crystal ball here to look a month into the future. My suggestion is knock those 2 stories out as fast as you can and rewrite them a bunch of times. And by doing that, man, by the time you hit week 2 and 3, you're cooking with gas and you're already thinking, because after that, all your web stories, you pitch me and you do whatever you want to do. So the first 2, I want common stories, about, your, people in your phase of life. After that, knock yourself out, do whatever you want to do. So start working on those stories. And the first one, 500 words, 6 still photos to accompany that article. It's due by 1 o'clock Wednesday, the 24th. The first video story is due by 1 o'clock Friday, the 26th of February. And the way to submit that is a YouTube URL. I cannot download your video file from a site which may be infected by Chinese hackers. I don't want to go to your portfolio page and hunt around and click on links which don't work. Y'all may have perfect portfolio sites. My experience is that I go to portfolio sites and half the links are broken. So, and also the reason I'm asking you to put it on your YouTube channel is because that is the preferred method of submission to news directors who may hire you for employment. They operate under the same restrictions I do, where I can't really, in good conscience, download a file of your video package and click it to open it, because you may not know it, but you may be sending a Chinese hacker bomb to me, right? So that's forbidden in our company. We can't download files. And YouTube is ubiquitous. Everybody uses it. You can look at the URL, and usually you're a little bit bulletproofed about clicking on that URL to go to YouTube. Plus, you want to save your work, right? And you want to have it in a convenient place. And YouTube's free, folks. so why pay for an account, some sort of Dropbox account online to store all your video? Because if you got a free Dropbox account and you're storing your video packages and files online, you're going to burn through that free allotment pretty fast. Put them on YouTube, save them on YouTube, and send me the link. Again, for all this stuff, I recommend you work in advance and you turn more content than you actually need to turn. I mean, if you get a fire lit underneath you and you start talking to friends and associates at school and you identify 5 students who've all been affected by COVID, maybe you write 5 stories. You write a series, right? And you do one, and you publish one every day that week on, and you send out a bunch of social media posts and drive a ton of viewers to your stories. And maybe you can use that series and go to your college newspaper and say, I've got a series about how COVID has affected, a student, a student researcher, an athlete, all these various people. So I'm not saying you don't have to do that. I'm not trying to put more pressure on you. I'm saying just the reality of it is the more you do, the better you're going to get. So work ahead on these stories. Overall, remember, it's 4 social media posts every week, a total of 28, 6 digital stories, a total of 6 video stories. All web stories due on Wednesday, video stories due on Friday, social media posts published Monday through Friday. Any questions about the first round of assignments, due the 24th and the 26th, or the overall assignment package?
With the social media posts, do you want us to use like hashtags or like tag you, iTrustGene or?
Yeah. I will email you a set of hashtags that if you can work them in, that'd be great. It'll probably be Nextstar, WRBL for us. If you're a WHNT intern, you probably want to tag WHNT. Is that okay, Justin? And then so I can find them because I've got searches built into all my platforms, so where if you do it with iTrustGene, it'll just ping me and I can quickly go through everybody's posts and offer you, and reshare, so you're getting to a wider audience. So yeah, I would ask that you also do iTrustGene. The primary ones again are your station. For me, it's hashtag WRBL. For HNT, if you're an HNT intern, it's hashtag WHNT, and then hashtag Nextstar and hashtag iTrustGene, and I'll email those to you so you've got them when we get closer to actually making those posts, or I'll do it before the end of the day today. I'll send you those hashtags. So if you've already started to post about being in the internship, you can attach those hashtags. Is that cool, Rolanda? Thank you. Any other questions? I think I might have saw one other hand go up. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I had a question. So what happens if the person doesn't like want their photo, but they don't mind being interviewed?
Find somebody else.
Okay, got it.
Because if you go to somebody and you say, hey, I want to do a TV story about you, and you can interview me, but I don't want to be on camera, you don't have a TV story. So start getting yourself used to convincing people to go on camera, or find somebody else to illustrate your story. Because with TV, if you don't have pictures, you don't have a TV story. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right, cool. Remember, you're engaged in this process right now. Please finish it quickly. Own your name across platforms: Gmail, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and a Facebook page. I recommend you also try to own it on TikTok and Twitch. Forget Periscope. Periscope just went belly up. They went out of business, so forget about Periscope. But certainly Twitch. How many of y'all are into Twitch just on your own for fun? Nobody? Okay. Yeah, YouTube streaming, gaming streaming. Ever since Ninja left Twitch, that started a kind of a downturn for Twitch, and they've been doing some crazy stuff with giving copyright strikes to a lot of people and demonetizing a bunch of people lately. So, you know, I'm not sure about their long-term viability. Mixer went out of business. You know, that was a Microsoft equivalent of Twitch. So, and now YouTube streaming, specifically for gaming, is really picking up steam. So if you're on YouTube, you're taken care of. I just grabbed a Twitch account, you know, last year because I wanted to own my brand on it. And then when you establish all these, your presence on all these platforms, then look for me and connect with me, like, follow, whatever the platform's, you know, version of that is. Connect with me on that platform, and I will connect back with you, and then you'll be in my feeds, so I can also see your stuff in my feeds. So do that as quickly as you can, and so that we can all get connected, and do it for your classmates as well. Any questions about that? Check your email very often, at least daily. Email is the way I'm going to communicate with you. You've already seen that I've sent, anytime y'all need to know something, as soon as I know it, I try to get in front of you guys to give you the information and the deadlines and the timing of all that, so that you can plan. You all lead busy lives, and so email is the way I'm going to send that to you all. I'm not going to text you. I'm not going to DM you. Because it's a part of what we do in a corporate America is, if we're communicating with you guys, we got to have a record of it, and the record is email. And it's also easy for me to do because I've already got an email list built for you guys, and I just pull that up and hit boom. Hey guys, I found this cool thing. Thought you might like it. Bam, I send it out. So check your email. Are you going to miss stuff, and you're going to miss deadlines? You're going to miss cool stuff. So check it at least daily. Any other overall questions, sidebar questions, other kinds of questions that maybe don't have any relation to housekeeping issues or today's lesson?
I actually have one for you, Jeannie. As you know, I am in Italy, and I've been thinking ahead of story ideas, but you know, I was wondering, a lot of people here, a good amount, they don't speak English. Is it best to stay away from story subjects that don't speak English, or is it okay to translate in my reporter track?
Yeah, you can translate. Yeah, I mean, that's a really cool experience you're going through. Do you have any English speaking classmates over there that you can speak with?
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of Americans here.
Yeah, well, you may want to just find one of those people to do, you know, a story with over there. Because I mean, being able to, you know, we'll have a bunch of other people who are currently in the United States doing their stories about what those students are going through right now. But, you know, there was a time last year when all those students who were already overseas from the US or were intending to go overseas, their plans got shuttled because of COVID. That's really cool. You've been able to actually do your program despite COVID. So I find that incredibly interesting. I want to know how you did it, you know, and maybe some of those other English speaking students will share a little bit about how they overcame those challenges and were able to continue their foreign study. So, but if you find a really interesting story or person, and that person only speaks Italian, but you can translate it, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in cool stuff you're seeing and doing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Here's today's reading suggestion, reading recommendation. It's Christopher Vogler, The Writer's Journey. It's the 25th anniversary edition. The original's fine. Probably get that cheaper, but this is the 25th anniversary edition. Mythic structure for writers. So think about the story backbone that every movie, every novel, most every novel, most every TV show is built upon, right? There are some common, what's known as archetypes. There are some common themes that permeate most all human storytelling. This is a book which is phenomenal for breaking down story structure, archetypes, and the characters in stories, right? In its simplest form, you're watching a Marvel movie and, Captain America is the good guy and Thanos is the bad guy, right? So you got the protagonist and you got the antagonist. Those concepts, protagonist, antagonist, in that same universe, Loki is a trickster. That's a type of character that has been used in literature and stories from before writing was invented and people in bearskins sat around a campfire telling stories to each other. The trickster story, specifically of Loki, who's an actual, god, in ancient mythology, those types of characters have driven storytelling for thousands of years. This is incredibly illuminating because if you get into it, and I have, I'm a story geek, I'm a writing geek, as you see news stories that other people do, you will identify on those news stories the same archetypes, the same structure, and the same motifs. It's as if somebody pulled the curtain back and explained to you, this is how the guts of story works underneath the surface, which no one ever showed me before. So if you understand those archetypes, those motifs, those story structure things, and you get into them and learn about them, you can employ them in your storytelling techniques. The viewer doesn't care if the character you've captured on video for a factual news story has attributes that represent, the wizard, the wise teacher, Gandalf, pick somebody else from a movie or a TV show, right? Or a trickster, Loki, or Captain America, the hero, right? Or Thanos, the antagonist. All those descriptors and motifs and archetypes are codified in this book. It's a enjoyable book if you like story and writing and creating stories and reading. It's also an encyclopedia. So I have a copy on my shelf, and I find myself, I'll watch another show or a movie, or I'll read a book, and something will spark in my memory, and I'll go back to this book, and I'll just want to know, like, okay, the author of this novel, employed this type of character in that book. It's a direct match between these are the attributes and what this character usually does in ancient mythology. This is what they did on Mount Olympus, and in this novel, this is what they're doing here. And then the movie adaptation of it, they use the same motifs and archetypes. So to me, it's been an incredibly illuminating thing, which has sort of unlocked for me a lot of the elements of the secret stuff that happens underneath the water, in the depths of the river. And, why do humans react in certain ways to certain kinds of characters and stories? A lot of that is just spelled out. And a lot of people who write television shows and movies and novels are huge fans of this particular book. And another one, which is a little bit more academic, by Joseph Campbell, called The Hero's Journey. Is anybody into Star Wars in this? That's just more my generation, probably. Well, Star Wars is a huge universe, and before the Marvel universe came into existence on film, Star Wars was out there, and George Lucas, who's the producer of the Star Wars universe, basically sat down with this sociologist, Joseph Campbell, a college professor, and Joseph Campbell explained the stuff you'll see in this book, The Writer's Journey, and in Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero's Journey. And that's the backbone of how George Lucas then created his characters for the Star Wars universe. He took the wise person, Obi-Wan. He took the reluctant hero, now I'm forgetting the kid's name. The antagonist, Darth Vader, and created the Star Wars universe out of the hero's journey. And so this is a practical application of the hero's journey to the writer and storyteller. So that's why I recommend this book to you. And that's our meeting today. Did that go okay for you guys? Okay, hopefully I didn't bore you guys with the story theory part, but I find that a lot of times at university, unless you take a literature course or an actual creative writing course or something, they justifiably concentrate on a lot of the practical aspects, how to write AP style, how to shoot video, how to edit video, let's practice it in a senior practicum, but you don't understand or get exposure to the keys underneath the surface, which are the very foundation of what story is based upon. And for me, it has made me a much more powerful storyteller by understanding how story works and how humans react naturally to different elements and archetypes and structures in story. And then I apply those to my journalism work. So I wanted to share that with you guys so you'd have those keys, those secret keys that not a lot of young journalism students get exposed to. So hopefully you'll find that valuable. Thursday, Sam Sachs will be with us, and Sam is going to be talking about some very practical things about structuring your web stories and in a way which make them palatable to readers. Then we got some cool other stuff coming up next week, and I'm in the process of booking guest lecturers, and some of them are going to be really cool. I'm excited about some of the people that have said yes, but until we get I'll jump over all the hoops. I'm not going to reveal them yet, but as soon as I know, I'll be sharing with you guys, and then you start following those people on social media and getting to know them in preparation for their guest lectures. So guys, any final questions before we sign off today? It's been a blast.
Question actually about the first video story. So for the first video story, is that on like a subject of our choice?
Yes, I'm less concerned about what you do. I'm more concerned about seeing the structure that I shared with you last time, which is the story should be about a minute long. If it's 50 seconds, that's cool. If it's a minute 20, that's cool. Don't make it 5 minutes. 3 sequences, and remember, a sequence is wide, medium, close. Each sequence should have a natural sound burst in it. So at least 3 sequences. You can have 10 sequences if you want to do that, but at least 3. Each sequence has a wide, medium, a close-up shot. Each sequence has a natural sound burst, and then you interview the star of your story, the key subject in your story, and I want to see at least one process soundbite. Here's what I'm doing. Use that track underneath a sequence of them doing something, and then one motivation soundbite. Here's why I do what I do, and I do want you guys to shoot a 7 to 9 second closing stand-up and put it on the end of that story, because I want to get y'all to start getting habituated to, shooting those stand-ups, and also when you then post it, then that's news directors are looking to see if you're confident on camera, if you're comfortable relaying that information. And so that'll give you all some practice doing that. So the structure of assignment number 1, at least 3 sequences, wide, medium, close, a nat sound burst with each sequence, interview your subject story, star, a why soundbite, a what soundbite, 1 or more of those, and a closing stand-up. And the story's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning is I got a problem. The middle is I'm working to fix my problem. The end is I fixed my problem. And the example I used for you was mowing the grass. That yard's ugly. Here I am cutting and edging. Wow, that's a beautiful front yard. so you fix your problem. Does that make sense? So I'm really more concerned with structure. I'm really more concerned with you writing less and talking less and understanding why good pictures, good net sound, and good sound. In my perfect world for this, you don't say a single thing underneath the video. You've got enough sound where you can use what they say to be the track for the entire story. And the only time I hear from you is your closing stand-up. It's about habituating yourself to look for great sound and good pictures, and being able to edit those together in a lucid story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So less track, more driven by the subject matter star and the video and natural sound. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks.
All right, I'll see y'all Thursday. Be blessed.